Hello viewers and welcome to another chapter of reading. If you celebrate both or either, happy Kwanzaa and happy Boxing Day. So without further ado, let's get started on the chapter, shall we? Chapter 28. Snape's Worst Memory. By order of the Ministry of Magic, Dolores Jane Umbridge, High Inquisitor, has replaced Albus Dumbledore as head of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. The above is in accordance with Educational Decree number 28. Signed, Cornelius Oswald Fudge, Minister of Magic. The notices had gone up all over the school overnight, but they did not explain how every single person within the castle seemed to know that Dumbledore had overcome two Aurors, the High Inquisitor, the Minister of Magic, and his junior assistant to escape. No matter where Harry went within the castle the next day, the sole topic of conversation was Dumbledore's flight, and although some of the details might have gone awry in the retelling, Harry overheard one second-year girl assuring another that Fudge was now lying in St. Mungo's with a pumpkin for a head. Okay, my brain literally took that literally for a minute. A Minister of Magic with an actual pumpkin for a head. Okay, what spell makes that happen? Ah, that was a good rap, J.K. Rowling. Thank you. It was surprising how accurate the rest of their information was. Everybody seemed aware, for instance, that Harry and Marietta were the only students to have witnessed the scene in Dumbledore's office, and as Marietta was now in the hospital wing, Harry found himself besieged with requests to give a first-hand account of wherever he went. "Dumbledore will be back before long," said Ernie Macmillan confidently on the way back from herbology after listening intently to Harry's story. "They couldn't keep him away in our second year, and they won't be able to this time. Backfire told me." He dropped his voice more conspiratorially, so that Harry, Ron, and Hermione had to lean in closer to him to hear. "That Umbridge tried to get back into his office last night after they searched the castle and grounds for him. Couldn't get past the gargoyle. The head's office has sealed itself against her." Ernie smirked. "Apparently, she had a right little tantrum." "Oh, I expect she really fancied herself sitting up there in the head's office," said Hermione viciously as they walked up the stone steps into the entrance hall. "Lording it all over the other teachers, the stupid, puffed up, power crazy old. Now do you really want to finish that sentence, Granger?" Draco Malfoy slid out from behind the door, followed by Crabbe and Goyle. His pale, pointed face was alight with malice. "Afraid I'm going to have to dock a few points from Gryffindor and Hufflepuff," he drawled. "You can't take points from fellow prefects, Malfoy," said Ernie at once. "I know prefects can't dock points from each other," sneered Malfoy. Crabbe and Goyle snickered. But members of the Inquisitorial Squad. The what? Said Hermione sharply. The Inquisitorial Squad, Granger, said Malfoy, pointing toward his tiny silver eye upon his robes just beneath his prefect's badge. A select group of students who are supporters of the Ministry of Magic, handpicked by Professor Umbridge. Anyway, members of the Inquisitorial Squad do have the power to talk points. So, Granger, I'll have 5 from you for being rude about our new head mistress, McMillan, 5 for contradicting me, 5 because I don't like you, Potter. You see, your shirt's untucked, so I'll give you another 5 for that. Oh yeah, I forgot. Oh, my blood, Granger, so 10 for that. Ron pulled out his wand, but Hermione pushed it away, whispering, Don't! Why, move, Granger, breathed Malfoy. New head, new times. Be good now, Potty, Weasel King. He strode away, laughing heartily with Crabbe and Goyle. He was bluffing, said Ernie, looking appalled. He can't be allowed to dock points. That would be ridiculous. It would completely undermine the prefix system. But Harry, Ron, and Hermione had turned automatically to the giant hourglasses set in niches along the wall behind them, which recorded the house points. Gryffindor and Ravenclaw had been neck and neck in the lead that morning, and even as they watched, stones flew upward, reducing the amounts in the lower bulbs. In fact, the only glass that seemed unchanged was the emerald-filled one of Slytherin. Noticed, have you? Said Fred's voice. He and George had just come down the marble staircase and joined Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Ernie in front of the hourglasses. Malfoy just ducked us all about 50 points, said Harry furiously, as they watched several more stones fly upward from the Gryffindor hourglass. Okay, now I'm curious. So, let's see. Harry estimates 50. Let's see how close he is. I'm curious. Okay. 10 for Hermione being the blood plus 5 about her being the head being rude about Umbridge is 15. Then we add another 5 for Ernie. Then we add another 5 because Draco doesn't like Harry. That's 25, so... Oh, Harry. I think you need to learn some basic math. Oh, wait, hold on. If we add another 5 from Ron, that's 30. So, you having about 50 points is inaccurate. I got curious and I wanted to tally it up, so I tallied it up for you guys. You're welcome. Okay, moving forward. Yeah, Montague tried to do a store and break, said George. What do you mean tried? Said Ron quickly. Never managed to get all the words out. Said Fred, due to the fact that we forced him headfirst into that fencing cabinet on the first floor. Foreshadowing! That object is foreshadowing. Hermione looked very shocked. That's me replicating her probable shocked expression. But you'll get into terrible trouble! Not until Montague reappears, and that could take weeks. I don't know where we sent him, said Fred coolly. Anyway, we've just said we don't care about getting into trouble anymore. Have you ever? Said Hermione. Of course we have, said George. Never been expelled, have we? We've always known where to draw the line, said Fred. We might have put a toe across it occasionally. Said George. But we've always stopped short of causing real mayhem, said Fred. But now, said Ron tentatively. Well, now, said George. But with Dumbledore gone, said Fred. We reckon a bit of mayhem, said George. It's exactly what our dear new head deserves, said Fred. You mustn't, whispered Hermione. You really mustn't. She'd love a reason to expel you. You don't get it, Hermione, do you? Said Fred, smiling at her. You don't care about staying anymore. We'd walk right out right now if we weren't determined to do it for Dumbledore first. So anyway, he checked his watch. I don't wear a watch, so just pretend. Phase 1 is about to begin. I'd get in the big hall for lunch if I were you. That way the teachers will see you can't have anything to do with it. Anything to do with what? Said Hermione anxiously. You'll see, said George. Run along now. Ron and George turned away and disappeared in the swallowing crowd descending the stairs toward lunch. Looking highly disconcerted, Ernie muttered something about unfinished transfiguration homework and scurried away. I think we should get out of here, said Hermione nervously. Just in case. Yeah, right, said Ron, and the three of them moved toward the doors to the great hall. But Harry had barely glimpsed today's ceiling of scudding white clouds when somebody tapped him on the shoulder, and turning, he found himself almost nose to nose with Filch, the caretaker. He took several hasty steps backward. Filch was best viewed at a distance, I'm sure. The headmistress would like to see you, Kwanzaa. He leered. Do it, Harry said stupidly, thinking of whatever Fred and George were planning. Filch's jaws wobbled with silent laughter. Guilty conscience, he wheezed. Follow me. Harry glanced back at Ron and Hermione, who were both looking worried. He shrugged and followed Filch back into the entrance hall against the tide of hungry students. Filch seemed to be in an extremely good mood. He hummed creakingly under his breath as they climbed the marble staircase. As they reached the first landing, he said, "Things are changing around here, Potter." "I've noticed," said Harry coldly. "It's like I've been telling Dumbledore for years and years he's too soft with you all," said Filch, chuckling nastily. "You filthy nobodies would never have dropped stink pellets if you'd known I had it in my power to refuse Rob, would you now? Nobody would have thought of throwing faint frisbees down the corridors if I could have sprung you up by the ankles in my office, would they? But when Educational Decree 29 comes in, Potter, I'll be allowed to do them things. And Shays asked the minister to sign an order for the expulsion of Paves. Things are going to be very different around here with her in charge." Umbridge had obviously gone to some lengths to get Filch on her side. Harry thought, and the worst of it was that he probably would prove an important weapon. His knowledge of the school's secret passageways and hiding places was probably second only to the Weasley twins. "Here we are," he said, wearing down at Harry as he rapped 3 times upon Professor Umbridge's door and pushed it open. "The Potter boy to see you, ma'am." Umbridge's office, so very familiar to Harry from his many detentions, was the same as usual, except for the large wooden block lying in front of, across the front of her desk, on which golden letters spelled the word Headmistress. Also his firebolt, and Fred and George's clean sweeps, which he saw with the peg were now changed and padlocked to a stout iron peg in the wall behind the desk. Umbridge was sitting behind the desk, busily scribbling upon some of her pink parchment, but looked up and smiled widely at their entrance. "Thank you, Arcus," she said sweetly. "Not at all, ma'am. Not at all," said Filch, bowing as well as his rheumatism would permit, and exiting backward. "Sit," said Umbridge curtly, pointing toward a chair and Harry sat. She continued to scribble for a few moments. He watched some of the falcons gamboling around the plates over her head, wondering what fresh horse she had in store for him. "Well now," she said, finally sitting down her quill and looking like a toad about to swallow a particularly juicy fly. "Oh, what an image, thank you." "What would you like to drink?" "What?" said Harry, quite sure he had misheard her. "To drink, Mr. Potter," she said, smiling still more widely. "Tea? Coffee? Pumpkin juice?" I mean, I wouldn't say no to tea, but at the same time, this tea is coming from Umbridge. I would be a little wary. What about you guys? As she named each drink, she gave her short wand a wave, and a cup or glass of it appeared upon her desk. "Nothing, thank you," said Harry. "I wish you to have a drink with me," she said, her voice becoming more dangerously sweet. "Choose one." "Fine. Tea, then," said Harry, shrugging. She got up and made quite a performance of adding milk with her back to him. Then she bustled around the desk with it, smiling in the sinisterly sweet fashion. "There," she said, handing it to him. "Drink it before it gets cold, won't you? Well, now, Mr. Potter, I thought we ought to have a little chat after the distressing events of last night." He said nothing. She settled herself back into her seat and waited. When several more moments passed in silence, she said gaily, "I'm not drinking up." He raised the cup to his lips, and then just as suddenly lowered it. One of the horrible painted kittens behind Umbridge had great round blue eyes, just like Mad-Eye Moody's magical one, and it had just occurred to Harry that what Mad-Eye would say if he ever heard that Harry had drunk anything offered by a known enemy. I can just imagine Moody going, "Constant vigilance!" What about you guys? What's the matter? Said Umbridge, who was still watching him. Do you want sugar? No, said Harry. He raised the cup to his lips again and pretended to take a sip, though keeping his mouth tightly closed. Umbridge's smile widened. Good, she whispered. Very good. Now then, she leaned forward a little. Where is Albus Dumbledore? No idea, said Harry promptly. Drink up, she said, still smiling. No, Mr. Potter, let us not play childish games. I know that you know where he has gone. You and Dumbledore have been in this together from the beginning. Consider your position, Mr. Potter. I don't know where he is. Harry pretended to drink again. Very well, said Umbridge, looking displeased. In that case, you will kindly tell me the whereabouts of Sirius Black. Harry's stomach turned over, and his hand holding the teacup shook so that the cup rattled in its saucer. He tilted the cup to his mouth with his lips pressed together, so that some of the hot liquid trickled down onto his robes. I don't know, he said a little too quickly. Mr. Potter, said Umbridge, let me remind you that it was I who almost caught the criminal back in the Gryffindor fire in October. I know perfectly well it was you he was mating, and if I had any proof neither of you would be at large today. I promise you, I repeat, Mr. Potter, where is Mr. Black? No idea, said Harry wildly. Haven't got a clue. They stared at each other so long that Harry felt his eyes watering. Then she stood up. Very well, Potter. I will take your word for it this time. But be warned, the might of the Ministry stands behind me. All channels of communication in and out of the school are being monitored. A few network regulators keeping much of every fire at Hogwarts. Except my own, of course. Foreshadowing. My inquisitorial squad is opening and reading all outposts entering and leaving the castle. And if Mr. Filch is observing all secret passages in and out of the castle, if I find a shred of evidence... BOOM! The very floor of the office shook. Umbridge slipped sideways, posing her desk for support, looking shocked. I would have loved to see that in the films. She was gazing toward the door. Harry took the opportunity to empty his almost full cup of tea into the nearest vase of dried flowers. He could hear people running and screaming several floors below. Back to lunch with you, Potter! Cried Umbridge, raising her wand and dashing out of the office. Harry gave her a few seconds' start, then hurried after her to see what the source of all the uproar was. It was not difficult to find. One floor down, pandemonium reigned. Somebody, and Harry had a very short idea who. I mean, yeah, I don't think it would take long to figure out who either. Had set off what seemed to be an enormous parade of enchanted fireworks. Dragons comprised entirely of green and gold sparks were soaring up and down the corridors, emitting loud fiery blasted bangs as they went. Shocking pink Catherine wheels, 5 feet in diameter, were whizzing lethally through the air like so many flying saucers. Rockets with long tails of brilliant silver stars were ricocheting off the walls. Sparklers were raining squarewards in mid-air of their own accord. Firecrackers were exploding like mines everywhere Harry looked, and instead of burning themselves out, fading from sight, or fizzling to a halt, these pyrotechnical miracles seemed to be gaining in energy and momentum the longer he watched. Filch and Umbridge were standing, apparently transfixed with horror, halfway down the stairs. As Harry watched, one of the larger cavern wheels seemed to decide that what it needed was more room to maneuver. It whirled toward Umbridge and Filch with a sinister whee! I'm sorry, I'm laughing because I never thought I would use that sound effect as I read. Moving forth, though. Both adults yelled with fright and ducked as it soared straight out of the window behind him and off across the grounds. Meanwhile, several of the dragons and a large purple bat that was smoking obviously took advantage of the open door at the end of the corridor to escape toward the second floor. "Hurry, Filch! Hurry!" shrieked Umbridge. "They'll be all over the school unless they do something! Stupid light!" A jet of red light shot out the end of her wand and hit one of the rockets. Instead of freezing in midair, it exploded with such force that it blasted a hole in a painting of a soppy-looking witch in the middle of the meadow. She ran for it just in time, reappearing seconds later squashed into the painting next door, where a couple of wizards playing cards stood up hastily to make room for her. Such gentlemen. "Don't stun them, Filch!" shouted Umbridge angrily for all the world as though it had been his suggestion. "Right you are, Headmistress," wheezed Filch, who was as quick and could do no more to have stunned the fireworks than swallowed them. He dashed to a nearby cupboard, pulled out a broom, and began swatting at the fireworks in midair. Within seconds, the head of the broom was ablaze. Well, what do you expect? What do you expect? Harry had seen enough. Laughing, I mean, you heard my laughter earlier, so I'm with him. He ducked down low, ran to a door he knew was concealed behind a tapestry, and knitted away along the corridor, and slipped through it to find Fred and George hiding just behind it, listening to Umbridge and Filch's yells, clucking with suppressed mirth. "Impressive," Harry said, quietly grinning. "Very impressive. You'll put Dr. Filibuster out of business, no problem." "Cheers," whispered George, wiping tears of laughter from his face. "But I do hope she tries banishing them next. They multiply 10 by 10 every time you try." The fireworks continued to burn and spread all over the school that afternoon, though they caused plenty of disruption, particularly the firecrackers. The other teachers did not seem to mind them very much. "Dear, dear," said Professor McGonagall sardonically, as one of the dragons soared around her classroom, emitting loud bangs and inhaling flame. "Well, I don't know about the flame, but here's some bangs." Bang! 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 "Miss Brown, would you mind running around to the headmistress and informing her that we have an escaped firework in our classroom?" The upshot of it all was that Professor Umbridge spent her first afternoon as headmistress running all over the school, answering to the summonses of the other teachers, none of whom seemed able to rid the rooms of the fireworks without her. When the final bell rang and the students were heading back to Gryffindor Tower with their bags, Harry saw, with immense satisfaction, a disheveled and soot-blackened Umbridge, tottering, sweaty-faced from Professor Flitwick's classroom. "Thank you so much, Professor," said Professor Flitwick in his squeaky little voice. "I could have gotten rid of the sparklers myself, of course, but I wasn't sure whether I had the authority." Beaming, he closed his classroom door in her snarling face. Fred and George were heroes that night in the Gryffindor common room. Even Hermione fought her way through the excited crowd around them to congratulate them. "They were wonderful fireworks," she said admiringly. "Thanks," said George, looking both surprised and pleased. "Weasley's was wildfire whiz-bangs. Only thing is, we've used our whole stuff. We're gonna have to start again from scratch now." "It was worth it, though," said Fred, who was taking orders from clamoring Gryffindors. "If you want to add your name to the waiting list, Hermione, it's 5 galleons for your basic blaze box, and 20 for the deflagration deluxe." Hermione returned to the table where Harry and Ron were sitting, staring at their school bags, as though hoping their homework might spring out of it and start doing itself. Wouldn't that be nice? "Oh, why don't we have a night off?" said Hermione brightly, as the silver-tailed Weasley rocket zoomed past the window. "After all, the Easter holidays start on Friday. We've plenty of time then." "Are you feeling all right?" Ron asked, staring at her in disbelief. "Now that you mention it," said Hermione happily, "you know, I think I'm feeling a bit rebellious." Harry could still hear the distant bangs. Bang, bang, bang. They're fire to show they're distant. Of escaped firecrackers when he and Ron went up to bed an hour later. And then and as he got undressed, the sparkler group floated past the tower, still resolutely spelling out the word poo. He got into bed yawning. Oh, here it comes. With his glasses off. Yes, this is what I look like when I'm not wearing my glasses. The occasional fireworks still passing the window became blurred, looking like sparkling clouds, beautiful and mysterious against the black sky. He turned onto his side, wondering how Umbridge was feeling about her first day in Dumbledore's job, and how Fudge would react when he heard that the school had spent most of the day in a state of advanced disruption. Smiling to himself, he closed his eyes. The whizzes and bangs of escaped fireworks in the ground seemed to be growing more distant. Again, quieter because they're distant. Or perhaps he, Harry, was simply speeding away from them. He had fallen right into the corridor leading to the Department of Mysteries. He was speeding toward the plain black door. Let it open. Let it open. It did. He was inside the circular room lined with doors. He crossed it, placed his hand upon an identical door, and it swung inward. He was now in a long rectangular room, full of an odd mechanical clicking. There were dancing flecks of light on the walls, but he did not pause to investigate. He had to go on. There was a door at the far end. It too opened at his touch, and now he was in a dimly lit room as high and wide as a church, with nothing but rows and rows of towering shelves, each laden with small, dusty, spun-glass spheres. Now Harry's heart was beating fast with excitement. He knew where to go. He ran forward, but his footsteps made no noise in the enormous deserted room. There was something in this room he wanted very, very much. Something he wanted. Or somebody else wanted. His scar was hurting. Bang! Harry woke instantly, confused and angry. The dark dormitory was full of the sound of laughter. Cool, said Seamus, who was silhouetted against the window. I think one of those Catherine wheels hit a rocket, and it's like they made it. Come and say! Harry heard Ron and Dean scramble out of bed for a better look. He lay quite still and silent while the pain in his scar subsided, and disappointment washed over him. He felt as though a wonderful treat had been snatched from him at the very last moment. He had got so close that time. Glittering glittering pink and silver-winged piglets were now soaring past the windows of Gryffindor Tower. Harry lay and listened to the appreciative whoops of Gryffindors in the dormitories below them. His stomach gave a sickening jolt as he remembered that he had occupancy to fall in the evening. Harry spent the whole of the next day dreading what Snape was going to say if he found out how much farther into the Department of Ministries he had penetrated during his last dream. With the surge of guilt, he realized that he had not practiced occupancy once since their last lesson. There had been too much going on since Dumbledore had left. He was sure he would not have been able to empty his mind even if he had tried. He doubted, however, whether Snape would accept that excuse. Yeah, I wouldn't put it past Snape to kind of doubt that. He attempted another last-minute practice during classes that day, but it was no good. Hermione kept asking him what was wrong whenever he fell silent, trying to rid himself of all thought and emotion. And after all, the best moment to empty his brain was not while teachers were firing review questions at the class. Resigned to the worst, he set off for Snape's office after dinner. Halfway across the entrance hall, however, Cho came hurrying up after him. Over here, said Harry, glad of a reason to postpone his meeting with Snape, and beckoning her across the corner of the entrance hall where the giant hourglasses stood. Gryffindor's was now almost empty. Are you okay? Umbridge hasn't been asking you about the DA, has she? Oh, no, said Cho hurriedly. No, it was only... No, I just wanted to say... Harry, I never dreamed Marietta would tell. Yeah, well, said Harry moodily. He did feel Cho might have chosen her friends a bit more carefully. It was small consolation that the last he heard, Marietta was still up in the hospital wing, and Madame Pomfrey had not been able to make the slightest improvement to her pimples. She's a lovely person, Prissy, said Cho. She just made a mistake. Harry looked at her incredulously. A lovely person who made a mistake? She sold us all out, including you. You got away, didn't we? Said Cho pleadingly. You know, her mom works for the ministry. It's pretty difficult for her. Ron's dad works for the ministry too, said Harry fiercely. And in case you hadn't noticed, he hasn't got snake written across his face. It was a really horrible trick of Hermione Granger's, said Cho fiercely. She should have told us she jinxed that list. was a brilliant idea, said Harry coldly. Cho flushed and her eyes grew brighter. Oh, yes, I forgot. Of course it was darling Hermione's idea. Don't start crying again, said Harry warningly. I wasn't going to, she shouted. Yeah, well, good, he said. Good enough to cope with at the moment. Go and cope with it then, she said furiously, turning on her heel and stopping off. Fuming, Harry descended the stairs to Snape's dungeon, and though he knew from experience how much easier it would be for Snape to penetrate his mind if he arrived angry and resentful, he succeeded in nothing but thinking of a few more good things he should have said to Cho about Marietta before reaching the dungeon door. You're late, Potter, said Snape coldly as Harry closed the door behind him. Snape was standing with his back to Harry, removing, as usual, a certain of his thoughts and placing them carefully in Dumbledore's pensive. He dropped the last silvery strand into the stone basin and turned to face Harry. So, have you been practicing? Yes, said Harry, looking carefully at one of the legs of Snape's desk. Wonder what that leg would look. Wonder what that leg looks like. Is it off balance? Is it a little shorter, a little longer? Maybe it's scratched, overly used. What about that leg caught your interest, Harry? I need to know. Well, soon find out, won't we? Said Snape smoothly. Find out, Potter. Harry moved into his usual position, facing Snape with the desk between them. His heart was pumping fast with anger at Cho, and anxiety about how much Snape was going to distract from his mind. On the count of 3, done, said Snape lazily. 1, 2. Snape's office door banged open, and Draco Malfoy sped in. Professor Snape, sir. Oh, sorry. Malfoy was looking at Snape and Harry in some surprise. It's all right, Draco, said Snape, lowering his wand. Potter is here. For little remedial potions. Harry had not seen Malfoy look so gleeful since Umbridge had turned up to inspect Hagrid. I didn't know, he said, leering at Harry, who knew his face was burning. He would have given a great deal to be able to shout the truth at Malfoy, or even better, to hit him with a good curse. Well, Draco, what is it? Asked Snape. It's Professor Umbridge, sir. She needs your help, said Malfoy. They found Montague, sir. He's turned up jam inside the toilet on the 4th floor. Yeah. I would be a little. If I were in that situation, I would be sad too. What about you guys? How did he get in there?" demanded Snape. "I don't know, sir. He's a bit confused." "Very well. Very well. Potter," said Snape, "we shall resume this lesson tomorrow evening instead." He turned and swept from his office. Malfoy mouthed, "Made of potions?" at Harry behind Snape's back before following him. A hint of curiosity, perhaps? Doesn't like him. But then again, it's probably in his character to find out and then pick on Harry about it. Either way, that's an interesting thing to do, Draco. Seething, Harry replaced his wand inside his robes and made to leave the room. At least he had 24 more hours in which to practice. He knew he ought to feel grateful for the narrow escape, though it was hard that it came at the expense of Malfoy telling the whole school that he needed remedial potions. He was at the office door when he saw it, a patch of shivering light dancing on the doorframe. He stopped, looking at it, reminded of something. Then he remembered. It was a little like the lights he had seen in his dream last night. The lights in the second room he had fought through on his journey through the Department of Mysteries. Mysteries. Oy. He turned around. The light was coming from the Pevensive sitting on Snape's desk. The silver-white contents were ebbing and swirling within Snape's thoughts. Things he did not want Harry to see if he broke through Snape's defenses accidentally. Harry gazed at the Pevensive, curiosity welling inside him. What was it that Snape was so keen to hide from Harry? The silver light shivered on the wall. Harry took 2 steps toward the desk, thinking hard. Could it possibly be information about the Department of Mysteries that Snape was determined to keep from him? Harry looked over his shoulder, his heart now pumping harder and faster than ever. How long would it take Snape to release Montague from the toilet? Would he come straight back to his office afterward, or accompany Montague to the hospital? Surely the latter. Montague was captain of the Slytherin Quidditch team. Snape would want to make sure he was alright. Harry walked the remaining few feet to the Pevensive and stood over it, gazing into its depths. He hesitated, listening, then pulled out his wand again. The office and the corridor beyond were completely silent. He gave the contents of the Pevensive a small prod with the end of his wand. The silvery stuff began to swirl very fast. Harry leaned forward over it and saw that it became transparent. He was, once again, looking down into the room as though through a circular window in the ceiling. In fact, unless he was much mistaken, he was looking down upon the great hall. His breath was actually fogging the surface of Snape's thoughts. His brain seemed to be in limbo. It would be insane to do the thing that he was so strongly tempted to do. He was trembling. Snape could be back at any moment. But Harry thought of Cho's anger, of Malfoy's jeering face, and a reckless daring seized him. He took a great gulp of breath and plunged his face into the surface of Snape's thoughts. At once, the floor of the office lurched, tipping Harry headfirst into the Pevensive. He was falling through cold blackness, spinning furiously as he went, and then he was standing in the middle of the great hall, but the 4 house tables were gone. Instead, there were more than 100 smaller tables, all facing the same way. At each set, a student had bent low, scribbling on a roll of parchment. The only sound was the scratching of quills. And the occasional rustle as somebody adjusted their parchment. It was clearly exam time. Sunshine was streaming through the high windows onto the bent heads, which shone chestnut and copper and gold in the bright light. Harry looked around carefully. Snape had to be here somewhere. This was his memory. And there he was, at a table right behind Harry. Harry stared. Snape, the teenager, had a stringy, flowered look about him, like a plant kept in the dark. His hair was lank, greasy, and flopping onto the table. His hooked nose barely half an inch from the surface of the parchment as he scribbled. Harry moved around behind Snape and read the heading of the examination paper. Defense against the dark arts. Ordinary wizarding never. So Snape had to be 15 or 16, around Harry's own age. His hand was flying across the parchment. He had written at least a foot more than his closest neighbors, and yet his writing was minuscule and cramped. 5 more minutes! The voice made Harry jump. Turning, he saw the top of Professor Flitwick's head moving past between the desks a short distance away. Professor Flitwick was walking past a boy with untidy black hair. Very untidy black hair. Harry moved so quickly that had he been solid, he would have knocked the desk flying. Instead, he seemed to slide, dreamlike, across 2 aisles and up a third. The back of the black-haired boy's head drew nearer and nearer. He was straining up now, putting down his quill. Pulling his roll of parchment toward him so as to reread what he had written. Harry stopped in front of the desk and gazed at his 15-year-old father. Excitement exploded in the pit of his stomach. It was as though he was looking at himself, but with deliberate mistakes. James' eyes were hazel. His nose was slightly longer than Harry's, and there was no scar on his forehead. But they had the same thin face, same mouth, same eyebrows. James's hair stuck up at the back exactly as Harry's did. His hands could have been Harry's, and Harry could tell that when James stood up, they would be within an inch of each other's heights. James yawned. Yep, there it was. Really need to find that synonym. Hugely, and rumpled up his hair, making it even more messier than it had been. Then, with a glance toward Professor Flitwick, he turned in his seat and grinned at a boy sitting 4 seats behind him. With another shock of excitement, Harry saw Sirius give James the thumbs up. Sirius was lounging in his chair with ease, tilting it back on 2 legs. He was very good looking. His dark hair fell into his eyes, and with a sort of casual elegance neither James nor Harry's could ever have achieved. And the girl sitting behind him was eyeing him hopefully, though he didn't seem to have noticed. And 2 seats along from this girl, Harry's stomach gave another pleasurable squirm. Was Remus Lupin. He looked rather pale and peaky. Was the full moon approaching? That's actually a good point to consider when you're wandering this train of thought here. It's possible if I were to answer this question, though. But what do you guys think? And was absorbed in the exam. As he reread his answers, he scratched his chin with the end of his quill, frowning slightly. So that meant Wormtail had to be around here somewhere too. And sure enough, Harry spotted him within seconds. A small mousy-haired boy with a pointed nose. Wormtail looked anxious. The man was chewing his fingernails, staring down at his papers, scuffing the ground with his toes. Every now and then he glanced hopefully at his neighbor's paper. Harry stared at Wormtail for a moment, then back at James, who was now doodling on a bit of scrap parchment. Oh, I've been there too many times to even count. He had drawn a snitch and was now tracing the letters L-E. What's they stand for? I'm debating whether or not I should tell you what they stand for. I'm deciding not to, because I think you'll figure it out eventually. Down, please, squeaked Professor Flitwick. That means you too, Stubbins. Please remain seated while I collect your parchment. Accio! More than 100 rolls of parchment zoomed into the air and into Professor Flitwick's outstretched arms, knocking him backward off his feet. Several people laughed. A couple of students at the front desk got up, took hold of Professor Flitwick beneath the elbows, and lifted him onto his feet again. Thank you, panted Professor Flitwick. Very well, everybody, you're free to go. Harry looked down at his father, who had hastily crossed out the L.E. he had been embellishing, jumped to his feet, and stuffed his quill and the exam question paper into his bag, which he swung over his back and stood waiting for Sirius to join him. Harry looked around and glimpsed Snape a short way away, moving between the tables toward the doors into the entrance hall, still absorbed in his own examination paper. Round shoulders yet angular, he walked in a twitchy manner that recalled a spider, his oily hair swinging about his face. A gang of chattering girls separated Snape from James and Sirius, and by planting himself in the midst of this group, Harry managed to keep Snape in sight while straining his ears to catch the voices of James and his friends. "Did you like question 10, Moony?" asked Sirius as they emerged into the entrance hall. "Loved it," said Lupin briskly. "Give 5 songs that identify the werewolf. Excellent question." "Do you think you managed to get all the signs?" said James in the tones of mild concern. "I think I did," said Lupin seriously as they joined the crowd thronging around the front doors, eager to get out into the sunlit grounds. "1, he's sitting in my chair. 2, he's wearing my clothes. 3, Seems pretty stupid. Wormtail was the only one who didn't laugh. I got the snout shape, pupils of the eyes, and the top tail, he said anxiously, but I couldn't think of what else. What's the call you, Wormtail? Said James impatiently. You run around with a werewolf once a month. Keep your voice down, implored Lupin. Harry looked anxiously behind him again. Snape remained close by, still buried in his examination questions. But this was Snape's memory, and Harry was sure that if Snape chose to wander off in a different direction once outside in the grounds, he, Harry, would not be able to follow James any further. To his intense relief, however, when James and his three friends strode off down the lawn toward the lake, Snape followed, still poring over the paper and apparently with no fixed idea of where he was going. Jogging a little ahead of him, Harry managed to maintain a close watch on James and the others. Well, I thought that paper was a piece of cake, he heard Sirius say. I'll be surprised if I don't get outstanding on it at least. Me too, said James. He put out his hand in his pocket and took out a struggling golden snitch. Where did you get that? Nicked it, said James casually. He started playing with the snitch, allowing it to fly as much as a foot away and seizing it again. His reflexes were excellent. Wormtail watched him with awe. They stopped in the shade of the very same beech tree on the edge of the lake where Harry, Ron, and Hermione had spent the Sunday finishing their homework, and threw themselves down into the grass. Harry looked over his shoulder yet again and saw to his delight that Snape settled himself on the grass in the dense shadows of a clump of bushes. He was as deeply immersed in the owl paper as ever, which left Harry free to sit down on the grass beneath the beech and the bushes, watching the foursome under the tree. The sunlight was dazzling on the smooth surface of the lake, on the bank of which the group of laughing girls who just left the great hall were sitting with shoes and socks off, pulling their feet in the water. Lupin pulled out a book and was reading. I mean, I would too. Sirius stared around at the students mulling over the grass, looking rather haughty and bored, but very handsomely so. James was still playing with the snitch, letting it zoom farther and farther away, almost escaping, but always grabbed at the last second. Wormtail was watching him with his mouth open. Every time James made a particularly difficult catch, Wormtail gasped and applauded. After 5 minutes of this, Harry wondered why James didn't tell Wormtail to get a grip on himself, but James seemed to be enjoying the attention. Harry noticed his father had a habit of rumpling up his hair as though to make sure it did not get too tidy. And also he kept looking over at the girls by the water's edge. Put that away, will you? Said Sirius finally, as James made a fine catch and Wormtail let out a cheer. Before Wormtail wets himself from excitement. Wormtail turned slightly pink, but James grinned. It bothers you, he said, stuffing the snitch back in his pocket. Harry had the distinct impression that Sirius was the only one for whom James would have stopped showing off. I'm bored, said Sirius. Wish it was full moon. You might, said Lupin darkly from behind his book. We've still got Transfiguration. If you bored, you could test me. Here. He held out his book. Sirius snorted. You don't need to look at that rubbish. I know it's all. This will liven you up, Padfoot, said James quietly. Look who it is. Sirius's head turned. He had become very still, like a dog that has scented a rabbit. A dog? Okay, I get that connects to Sirius, but why not a cat? That seems a little more fitting. Moving forth. Excellent, he said softly. Sniffleless. Harry turned to see what Snape was looking at. Snape was on his feet again, and was stowing the owl paper in his bag. As he emerged from the shadows of the bushes and sailed off across the grass, Sirius and James stood up. Lupin and Wormtail remained sitting. Lupin was still staring down at his book, though his eyes were not moving, and a faint frown line appeared between his eyebrows. Wormtail was looking from Sirius and James to Snape, with a look of avid anticipation on his face. "All right, Sniveless," said James loudly. Snape reacted so fast as though he had been expecting an attack. Dropping his bag, he plunged his hand inside his robes, and his wand was halfway into the air when James shouted, "Expelliarmus!" Snape's wand flew 12 feet into the air and fell with a little thud in the grass behind him. Sirius let out a bark of laughter. "Impedimenta!" he said, pointing his wand at Snape, who was knocked off his feet, halfway through a dive toward his own fallen wand. Students all around turned to watch. Some of them had gone to their feet and were edging nearer to watch. Some looked apprehensive, others entertained. I would not be amused at all. Bullying is not a pleasant experience. I would know. Okay, moving forth. Snape lay panting on the ground. James and Sirius advanced on him, wands up. James glancing over his shoulder at the girls near the water's edge as he went. Wormtail was on his feet now, watching hungrily, edging around Lupin to get a clear view. "How'd the exam go, Snively?" "I was watching him. His nose was touching the parchment," said Sirius viciously. "There'll be great grease marks all over it. They won't be able to read a word." Several people laughed. Snape was clearly unpopular. Oh, hugging Snape. Wormtail snickered shrilly. Snape was trying to get up, but the jinx was still operating on him. He was struggling, as though bound by invisible ropes. "You wait," he panted, staring up at James with an expression of purest willing. "You wait." "Wait for what?" said Sirius, going. "What are you going to do, Snively? Wipe your nose on us?" Snape let out a stream of mixed swear words and hexes, but with his wand being 10 feet away, nothing happened. "Wash out your mouth," said James coldly. "Scourgify!" Pink soap bubbles streamed from Snape's mouth at once. The broth was covering his lips, making him gag, choking him. "Leave him alone!" James and Sirius looked around. James's free hand jumped to his hair again. It was one of the girls from the lake edge. She had thick, dark red hair that fell to her shoulders and startlingly green, almond-shaped eyes. Harry's mother. "All right, Evans," said James, and the tone of his voice was suddenly pleasant, deeper, more mature. "Leave him alone," Lily repeated. She was looking at James with every sign of great dislike. "What's he done to you?" "Well," said James, appearing to deliberate the point, "it's more the fact that he exists, if you know what I mean." Many of the surrounding watchers laughed, Sirius and Wormtail included, but Lupin, still apparently intent on his book, didn't, and neither did Lily. "You think you're funny," she said coldly, "but you're just an arrogant Bonnie and tail rag, Potter. Leave him alone." "I will if you go out with me, Evans," said James quickly. "Go on. Go out with me and I'll never lay a wand on old Snively again." Behind him, the impediment Jinx was wearing off. Snape was beginning to inch toward his falling wand, spitting out soap suds as he crawled. "I wouldn't go out with you if it was a choice between you and the giant squid," said Lily. "Bad luck, Holmes," said Sirius briskly, turning back to Snape. "Oh, wait!" But it was too late. Snape had directed his wand straight at James. There was a flash of light, and a gash appeared on the side of James's face, spattering his robes with blood. James whirled about. A second flash of light later, Snape was hanging upside down in the air, his robes falling over his head to reveal skinny pallid legs and a pair of green underpants. Many people in the small crowd watching cheered. Jeering is something different. Sirius, James, and Wormtail roared with laughter. Lily, whose fierce expression had twitched for an instant as though she was going to smile, said, "Let him down!" "Certainly," said James, and he jerked his wand upward. Snape fell into a crumpled heap on the ground. Disentangling himself from his robes, he got quickly to his feet, wand up, but Sirius said, "Petrifus totalis," and Snape keeled over again, at once, rigid as a board. "Leave him alone!" Lily shouted. She had her own wand out now. James and Sirius eyed it warily. Evans, don't make me hex you," said James earnestly. "Take the curse off him, then." James sighed deeply. Then he turned to Snape and muttered the counter curse. "There you go," he said as Snape struggled to his feet again. "You're lucky Evans was here, Snivellus. I don't need help from filthy little mudblood like her." Lily blinked. "Fine," she said fully. "I won't bother in the future. And I'd wash your pants if I were you, Snivellus." "Apologize to Evans!" James roared at Snape, his wand pointed threateningly at him. "I don't want you to make him apologize," Lily shouted, rounding on James. "You're as bad as he is." "What?" yelped James. "I'd never call you a you-know-what. Messing up your hair because you think it looks cool to look like you just got off your broomstick, showing up with that stupid snitch, walking down corridors and hexing anyone who annoys you just because you can. I'm surprised your broomstick can get off the ground with that bad head on it. You make me sick! She turned on her heel and hurried away. Evans! James shouted after her. Hey, Evans! But she didn't look back. What is it with her? Said James, trying and failing to look as though this was a throwaway question of no real importance to him. Reading between the lines, I'd say she thinks you're a bit conceited, mate, said Sirius. Right, said James, who looked furious now. Right. There was another flash of light, and Snape was once again hanging upside down in the air. Who wants to see me take off Snively's pants? But whether Snape really did take off Snape's pants, Harry never found out. His hand had closed tight over his upper arm, closed with a pincer-like grip. Wincing, Harry looked around to see who had a hold of him, and saw with a thrill of horror a fully grown, adult-sized Snape standing right beside him, white with rage. Having fun. Harry felt himself rising into the air. The summer's day evaporated around him. He was floating upward through icy blackness, Snape's hand still tight on his upper arm. Then, with this swooping feeling that as though he turned head over heels in midair, his feet bit the stone floor of Snape's dungeon, and he was standing again beside the pensive on Snape's desk, in the shadowy present-day potions master's study. So, said Snape, gripping Harry's arm so tightly Harry's hand was starting to feel numb. So, you've been enjoying yourself, Potter. No, no, said Harry, trying to free his arm. It was scary. Snape's lips were shaking. His face was white. His teeth were bared. Amusing man. Your father, wasn't he? Said Snape, shaking Harry so hard that his glasses slipped down his nose. I didn't. Snape threw Harry from him with all his might. Harry fell hard onto the dungeon floor. You will not tell anybody what you saw, Snape bellowed. No, said Harry, getting to his feet as far. No, said Harry, getting to his feet as far from Snape as he could. No, of course I won't. Get out. Get out. I don't want to see you in this office ever again. And as Harry hurtled toward the door, a jar of dead cockroaches exploded over his head. He wrenched the door open and flew away up the corridor, stopping only when he had put 3/4 between himself and Snape. There he leaned against the wall, panting and rubbing his bruised arm. He had no desire at all to return to Gryffindor Tower so early, nor to tell Ron and Hermione what he'd just seen. What was making Harry feel so horrified and unhappy was not being shouted at or having jars thrown at him. It was that he knew how it felt to be humiliated in the middle of a circle of onlookers, knew exactly how Snape had felt as his father had taunted him, and judging from what he had just seen, his father had been every bit as arrogant as Snape had always told him. And that is the end of this chapter. Here is a hug for Harry and Snape. Because let's face it, they both need one in this chapter. They really do. But regardless, join me next week for chapter 29, Career Advice. Until then, bye!